Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with a hot take. And I got to do this one, even though I saw this on the Lotus Eaters and they already went through this article and it was really well done. But I have to go through it too. I have to add my 2 cents to the same article. So I'm just totally aping what they're doing, but I just can't believe this article either. It's an opinion piece in the New York Times because what else do they publish at this point? It's called Don't Go Down the Rabbit Hole by Charlie Warzel. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do it, isn't helping the fight against misinformation. Okay. And you can see the guy in this picture. He kind of looks like me from like 20 years ago before I went gray. That's me on the early days of the internet. But you got to listen to some of this. It's just not so crazy. For an academic, Michael Caulfield has an odd request. Stop overthinking what you see online. Isn't that an amazing opening? Stop overthinking, everyone. Whoa. It is what it is. Don't overthink it. No, you've had too much to think, my friend. You better sit down. Mr. Caulfield, a digital literacy expert, at Washington State University, Vancouver, Canada, knows all too well that at this very moment, more people are fighting for the opportunity to lie to you than at perhaps any other point in human history. Oh, well, I guess. But the election's over. Ha-ha, zing. Continuing, misinformation rides the greased algorithmic rails of powerful social media platforms and travels at velocities and in volumes that make it nearly impossible to stop. We could only wish that it was impossible to stop, but the algorithm is destroying everything. The algorithm is gaming the system so that, in my view, big corporations can get their message out, and anybody who doesn't like the narrative gets deplatformed. I've been demonetized here on YouTube. Smash like and subscribe, by the way. But also follow me on BitChute and Rumble because you can kind of see where this whole thing's going. Continuing. That alone makes information warfare an unfair fight for the average internet user. But Mr. Caulfield argues that the deck is stacked even further against us, that the way we're taught from a young age to evaluate and think critically about information is fundamentally flawed and out of step with the chaos of the current internet. See, he's a college professor. He knows better than you. Why, you just sit there. You've had too much to think. Quote, we're taught that in order to protect ourselves from bad information, what does he consider bad information? I mean, we'll see. Continuing, we need to deeply engage with the stuff that washes up in front of us, Mr. Caulfield told me recently. He suggested that the dominant mode of media literacy, if kids get taught any at all, is that you, quote, you'll get imperfect information and then use reasoning to fix that somehow. But in reality, that strategy can completely backfire. See, he says it can completely backfire. Yeah, it can. If you're an idiot, if you make a mistake, it also, if you're actually thinking critically, if you're actually reading and not taking everything at face value, eventually you're going to get to the truth. Oh, but since it can backfire, that's bad. Oh, that's bad. You might get something wrong. You might get an idea we don't like. Continuing, in other words, resist the lure of rabbit holes, in part by reimagining media literacy for the internet hellscape we occupy. Ooh, what was it, scary on the internet for you, Dr. Caulfield? Or Mr. Caulfield? Is he a doctor? I thought he was a PhD. Oh, he's an expert. So no, he's nothing. I guess he's not even a professor. Why are they talking to this guy? He's not even a professor. Well, I just made fun of professors, so. It's often counterproductive to engage directly with content from an unknown source, continues the article, and people can be led astray by false information. Influenced by the research of Sam Weinberg, a professor of Stanford, oh, there's a professor, and Sarah McGrew, an assistant professor at University of Maryland, Mr. Caulfield argued the best way to learn about a source of information is to leave it and look elsewhere, a concept called lateral reading. So, look elsewhere? Like, first off, this is something that can happen, doesn't always happen. How are you supposed to know when it happens? It doesn't really say. You know, you're just supposed to, better put that down, go somewhere else. For instance, you might imagine you were to visit, I don't want to say the name of this website, I don't want to get flagged by YouTube, but let's call it website X, a white supremacist message board, to try to understand racist claims in order to debunk them. Even if you see through the horrible rhetoric, at the end of the day, you gave that place, however, many minutes of your time, Mr. Caulfield wrote. Even with good intentions, you run the risk of misunderstanding something because that website users are way better at propaganda than you. You're too stupid. You won't get less racist reading the website critically, but you might be overloaded by information and overwhelmed. Says you jerk. Says you. Wow. Oh, your brain's too soft. You better not go to that website. Who knows what could happen? They're smarter than you. This is how weak he assumes people are. He thinks their brains are weak. It's absolutely woke-tarded. This guy, he shames the name Caulfield from Catch-22. Catch-22 reference, everybody. It was Caulfield, right? Continuing, our current information crisis, Mr. Caulfield argued, is an attention crisis. Yeah, you're boring me, dude. Quote, the goal of disinformation is to capture attention, and critical thinking is deep attention, he wrote in 2018. People learn to think critically by focusing on something and contemplating it deeply to follow the information's logic and the inconsistencies. No, that's not thinking critically. That's thinking, is the information logical or is it inconsistent? Contemplating it deeply gives you, time to really think about it. Is it real? Is it good? Something I should do more of. And this guy is basically telling you, let's think about a different way of thinking. You're a very busy person. You don't have time to contemplate things deeply. No, it gets worse. Continuing, that natural human mindset is a liability in an attention economy. What the hell's an attention economy? Look, you either have enough, wherewithal to put time and focus into something, to actually learn something, or you don't. I mean, people who read news, they're news junkies. The ones who really read, and they do drill down and read stuff. I'm a news junkie. I read news. Give me. I like to hear things. I like to know things. Not everybody's like me. A lot of people are just into sports. They'll drill down into sports. But you ask them about the news, they don't even know what the heck's going on. Same thing with people who are like into comics and games and cartoons and all that kind of stuff. They don't know what's going on. Oh, but they know anime. So it's whatever you're into. The attention economy is your economy. You can decide where your attention goes or doesn't go. This article is an insult to people who actually read this stuff. So the kind of people they're trying to move over, I'd say, would be a very tiny window of person. It would have to be a person who would be literate enough to read a New York Times op-ed and pay for it, because you usually have to pay for these things, and yet be illiterate enough to read this and not go, oh my God, he's telling me not to think. Continuing, it allows grifters, conspiracy theorists, trolls, and savvy attention hijackers to take advantage of us and steal our focus. Speak for yourself, woke-tard. You're not stealing my focus. I know what I'm focused on, and it's the New York Times and their massive decline. Oh, excuse me. Quote, whenever you give your attention to a bad actor, and again, who determines who's bad, who's good? You know, you can give your attention to somebody who is totally wrong on a lot of things and still learn something. You still learn something. You may learn, I mean, you could learn something from a flat earther, right? Hey, you're probably never going to agree with the flat earth theories. They're, in my view, totally wacky, but you might learn something about, I don't know, human nature at the very least. Continuing. Let me start. Quote, whenever you give your attention to a bad actor, you allow them to steal your attention from better treatments of an issue. Oh, better treatments. They're better treatments. And give them the opportunity to warp your perspective, Mr. Caulfield wrote. I assume this is Mr. Caulfield. This will be the cover, the back cover of his book picture, I think. What is this picture? One way to combat this dynamic is to change how we teach media literacy. Internet users need to learn that our attention is a scarce commodity that is to be spent wisely. Are you out of your effing mind? Do you know how busy people are? Have you seen people? South Park did an amazing episode where the running gag on the show was every time somebody got on the internet, they'd get distracted, start clicking on things, and the next thing you know, they were out somewhere eating ice cream. Because the algorithm pushed them that way. And that's exactly what happens. So he's actually encouraging people like you got important things to do. You don't have time to read a lot of stuff. Keep clicking. Click fast. Hurry up. Oh yeah. Like I have the attention span of a flea thanks to the internet. This guy's telling me, well, you better keep clicking. No, you got to go the other way. Especially as you get older. You want to actually learn stuff and you're sick of being wrong in conversations. Continuing, in 2016, Mr. Caulfield met Mr. Weinberg, who suggested modeling the process after the way professional fact checkers assess information. Oh, great. Like the guys at Snopes and Media Matters and all those places, right? Mr. Caulfield refined the practice into 4 simple principles. Stop. That's pretty simple. 2, investigate the source. 3, find better coverage. Well, what if the source is valid? And 4, trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context, otherwise known as SIFT. So in other words, stop, investigate the source, because if it's not the right source. See, this is the argument on Reddit. Are these guys from Reddit? Because they sound like professors of Reddit. That's what happens on Reddit if you get into an argument. Something, well, where did you read it? No, well, I read it here. Oh, well, that's not a legitimate source. That's an internet argument. Well, that's not legitimate. That's not engaging what was said. That's saying, well, I can't possibly believe you until you bring forth someone from the New York Times to say that it happened. In other words, if it hasn't happened and been covered on ABC, NBC, CBS, or wherever, does it exist? That's the way that works. That's why YouTube is clamping down. That's why they made me delete a bunch of videos and demonetized me and did that to a bunch of people. They're doing that because they're shutting off the other sources of information. So the narrative is just one thing. It's one internet. And everybody agrees on what we know. That's the way they want it to go. Mr. Caulfield walked me through the process using an Instagram post from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent anti-vaccine activist, falsely alleging a link between the human papillomavirus vaccine and cancer. Quote, if this is not a claim where I have depth of understanding, then I want to stop for a second and before going further, just investigate the source, Mr. Caulfield said. Okay, so first off, I talked about this before. Robert Kennedy Jr. got deplatformed. And so no one's immune. See, he held the wrong views, and off he goes. So here's how you fix it. Now think for a minute. You see something on Instagram, you go, I don't know. Where's the first place you go? Where's the first place you go to get some information? Okay, here's his solution. He copied Mr. Kennedy's name in the Instagram post and popped it into Google. Wow. Okay. First of all, I've stopped using Google. I use Pre-Search now. It's a pretty good search engine. Gives you more. It's more like old Google back when it was just words that it would search. It's not. Yeah. In my view, Google's bad. It's all. I'm surprised the first search didn't just come up Disney cruises. Continuing, quote, "Look how fast it is," he told me as he counted down the seconds out loud. In 15 seconds, he navigated to Wikipedia and scrolled through the introductory section of the page, highlighting with his cursor the last sentence, which reads, "Mr. Kennedy is an anti-vaccine activist and conspiracy theorist." Wow. Okay, first off, when I was a substitute teacher, they wouldn't even let the kids use Wikipedia because they knew what kind of site it is. It's a site in which anybody can go on Wikipedia and change the entry. I've changed my own entry. I'm on Wikipedia. I know. I put myself down. I looked to see what do I need to be on Wikipedia? Because I saw other writers and comic book guys on there. I said, I should be on Wikipedia. So it required like links to sources. So I sourced myself and I posted a bunch of stuff. And I probably should go check it out. Lord knows what's on it now. But, it's the joke that Stephen Colbert made back before he stopped becoming funny, where he was on the Colbert Report and he saved the elephants by going to the Wikipedia page and changing, endangered species to something else. Wikipedia, in my view, not a reliable source of information. For most things. Like you could look at, if you want to know which, albums, like the other day I had to look up Madonna's albums to figure out which one dropped when and when she was on that tour I talked about yesterday. It's good for that kind of pop culture stuff because the historical stuff about Madonna or the Beastie Boys or whatever, they're not going to change that. That's not political. But for political stuff, oh my God, it's awful now. It's just god awful. So bad. Everybody's coming up with their own wikis, political wikis. It's ridiculous. But these guys kind of trash Robert Kennedy. I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the son of Robert F. Kennedy, famous brother to JFK, famous presidential candidate who was assassinated, and a Kennedy, Democrat, the biggest Democratic family ever, legendary. They probably thought this guy would run for office one day. If Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the best unbiased source of information about a vaccine, I'd argue no, that's good enough to know we should probably just move on, he said. That's it? I mean, Robert F. Kennedy, he's not a doctor. And I don't know how much to trust his opinions on vaccines, but he is not, I don't think I'd call him a conspiracy theorist. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist when he did stuff for the environment, was he? No, back then he was a brave man, a brave Kennedy, doing Kennedy things. Oh, now he's a whack job, apparently, according to the New York Times and Wikipedia. Yeah, I can't read this whole thing. This goes on forever, but it's an amazing article basically telling you, go to authoritative sources. Remember when they did that on YouTube? They said, we're gonna weight everything so authoritative sources win. In other words, CNN, MSNBC, all the big news sites, they rise to the top and everybody else gets shafted because they don't push the narrative. And that's a very dangerous thing because at one point in human history, the narrative was the world is flat. There was another narrative. It was the stars revolve around the earth and the earth is the center of the universe. And anybody who went against that narrative, well, they got thrown in jail. They were considered heretics. They were thrown out of the church, which was very big at the time. This is like late Middle Ages, early Renaissance. Now we have a different narrative. And I can't even say them on YouTube because YouTube is part of the radicals who want to censor everything. Anything against the narrative, they're going to censor. And now they're trying to censor the way you think. They're trying to get you to pre-censor yourself. See, don't look into things. Trust the New York Times. Oh, sure, we've made mistakes. We wouldn't lie to you. Not you, baby. Not you. Yeah, I mean, it just goes on and on like this. And they're trying to push this idea of SIFT, a media-based literary unit, in political science classes. They'll try to push this into high schools and grammar schools soon. Oh, kids, now before you believe something you read on the internet, go to an authoritative source. How do you find that? Well, Google knows. See, the New York Times knows because that's been around a long time. So it must be good. Right? I mean, the New York Times wouldn't tell you there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Well, the New York Times wouldn't tell you to not wear a mask during a pandemic. Oh, the New York Times is always right. I mean, go back into the computer files and look for yourself. Do you see any wrong files there? Yeah, I didn't think so. Better sit down, kids. You better do your homework quickly because otherwise you might have too much to think.